side street on the east side of St. Paul, you'll still find, offset on a corner lot, a tunnel leading from the city above into a large ravine below. It was the only road in or out of a hidden valley, which cradled one of the oldest immigrant settlements in the history of Minnesota. While we lament the disappearance of grand homes and structures, for some, the most painful loss was that of an entire neighborhood. It happened here in a place called Swede Hollow.
The city had announced that one of the slums in the St. Paul was Swede Hollow. And I didn't know this until about years later when they had a documentary at the Historic Society showing the slums of Swede Hollow, and it's 1933. I said I was still living down there. I said that was the best place to be.
Below the mansions on Dayton's Bluff, the modest homes of Swede Hollow nestled in the valley along Phelan Creek. The hollow was named for its earliest arrivals, Swedish peasants who called it Svenskadalen, or Swedish Dale. And for over a century, it was a haven for wave after wave of poor immigrant families, a hint of Appalachia in the heart of the city.
Imagine this little valley in 1905. Our state census shows us that there were over 1,000 people living in this little valley. You look at it today, you can't picture that. You can't imagine over 1,000 people.
In Swede Hollow, there was no houses for rent, and I never seen a house for sale. I never seen a for sale house. If you went down there and there was an empty house, you just moved in. That's all. Nobody asked any questions. See.
To those who lived in Swede Hollow, the world in the city above was called Up on the Street, a place where progress marched on by, and modern inventions made life easy. In the hollow, fresh springs provided drinking water. Electricity was unknown, and in true old-world fashion, the creek was their sewer.
Of course, the privy was an important part of their life, and it was built over the creek on stilts, and it had to project out enough into the creek, and of course, every time you would get a heavy rain, that would make this very sedate creek a rushing torrent. Those privies, many of them would end up in the far end of the hollow, and would have to go be retrieved by their owners.
One of these lower privies that were down with the small stream, now they were a little bit too handy for somebody to drop a flat rock. They would splash the water up into the opening of the privy, and you could hear a lot of swearing in Italian. I mean, it was unprintable even in Italian. Yeah.
Looming above the hollow to the north was the Hams Brewery, its main brew house, an impressive specimen of industrial architecture. Built of red brick and stone, the brew house was an imposing 5 stories high, with long rows of arched windows, ornate North Germanic gables, and a splendid Baroque dome crowned by a cupola. At its opening in 1894, the expanded Excelsior Brewery drew a crowd of 10,000 curious people. One stop on the tour was the employees' refreshment room, where some workers fortified themselves with 40 or 50 glasses of beer a day. Swede Hollow was the perfect place for brewing beer, with its clear spring water and cool caves for storage. The brewery's owner, Theodore Ham, took full advantage of this, and by 1882 was turning out 30,000 barrels a year. Crowning Dayton's Bluff was the Ham Mansion. For 67 years, the house would create an almost medieval scene, standing like a baronial castle over Swede Hollow. The house was a Queen Anne confection with its round corner tower, its many gables, and its large arched windows that echoed those of the brewery down the hill. Inside, the house offered 20 rooms, 8 fireplaces, and all the other accoutrements of the good life in the 1880s.
Ham would throw very elegant parties. The band would be imported from the city. It's a good German band. The lawn was all lit with Chinese lanterns. He had tame deer that he kept in a barn below the bluff, and peacocks. And these animals would roam amongst his guests as they danced away the night. And I picture these children climbing up the hill, peering through the lilac bushes and seeing all of this and being, I think, inspired by it, this grandeur when their lives were being lived in abject poverty.
Across the valley on the western slope ran the tracks for the St. Paul and Duluth Railroad. There the Scully line rumbled through the hollow just a stone's throw from the houses.
At first, you get scared because you see all this vibration going on, and every time the train would go by, how the dishes would rattle in the cupboard. And after a while, you got used to it.
We lived in between tracks. We lived alongside of tracks. You could hear that whistle blow in the wintertime, and it was kind of comforting. You'd be snuggled in your bed, and you'd fall right to sleep. The noise didn't bother us.
By 1920, the Italians grew to be the largest group in the Hollow. Speaking very little English, newcomers would arrive by train at Union Depot and walk along the tracks to the northeast, through the railroad tunnels under East 7th Street and into the valley. There they would be directed to the right homes by notes pinned to their lapels, and though they held on to their own culture, they soon came to love their adopted home.
My father had a great voice, but he used to get home at between 9 and 10 o'clock. And the last thing he would do, he would sit on the middle of the big bridge, and we'd sing America, and then he would go to bed. This one time, the Steeles down at the other end, Mrs. Steele was telling the kids, now it's time to go to bed to school tomorrow. And little Donald Steele piped up and he said, oh, no, Ma. He says, Tony Sancelli hasn't sung America yet.
America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea.
Okay.
There it is. There's your house.
Now, don't you
because
remember?
their house was on
On a sunny November day, not so long ago, we followed a reunion of Swede Hollow kids back into the Hollow of today. Some of them had not been down through the tunnel in over 50 years.
The Swede Hollow was a great place to be poor. It was a great place to live. I never regret starting my life down there.
Mike Sancelli was born at 17 North Phelan Creek in 1914 and grew up during the Depression in Swede Hollow. At that time, the kids ran around in two groups called the Big Gang and the Little Gang, and all the families looked out for each other's children.
It was really nice. Really nice. We had Mexicans down here. We had Swedish people. We all got together. Sure. People were what they call togetherness.
The last group to live in the Hollow were Mexican Americans. Most came north in the 1920s to work the sugar beet fields. Dozens of poor families filled the worst houses in the Twin Cities, including those along Phelan Creek.
I guess they would be what a lot of people refer to as tar paper shacks. I guess I just don't think of it as that we lacked for anything.
The houses were now filled with families with names like Bravo, Heredia, Sanchez. They hardly knew those who had moved up on the street before them, but they soon came to love the place just as much.
I say that I'm of the first group of that family. There was 12 of us. The second group was a little more fortunate. By that time, we had gotten jobs in the city, and we were here, and we were able to support and make it possible for them to get a better education. So their lives changed. Today, they can't even relate to this.
But to those who lived here, the memories are bittersweet. For in the 1950s, it all came to an end. In April 1954, they saw the Ham Mansion go up in flames. A 14-year-old boy set the fire out of boredom, he said. In the Depression, the house had been used for charity work, a place where caseworkers met with poor families. The last Ham to live here died in 1933, and the house became a nursing home. Luckily, it had been abandoned just a few weeks before the blaze. The boy started one fire on the first floor and two on the second. Then he called the fire department and waited for the police.
When they told me they burnt it down, I said it was a crime to burn the house, a beautiful place like that down. Yeah, it was a beautiful house.
By the time the mansion lay in ashes, the brewery's magnificent dome was gone, along with most of its Victorian trappings. Beginning in 1946, it all disappeared beneath a series of remodelings and expansions. The Theodore Ham Brewing Company was making its push to become a national brand.
From the land of sky blue waters, from the land of pines, lofty balsams, comes a beer refreshing, Ham's a beer refreshing.